All right, there we go. Now the recording is started. Now I can start. So we're on chapter 11 this evening of Daniel, and we're gonna try and get through the chapter. We'll see what we do. Chapter 11 is a very dense chapter. A lot of history that the angel tells Daniel. And remember, this chapter is unique in in the in Daniel, or it's not unique, it's another way that God communicates with us. Remember this one, Daniel has interpreted dreams. He has had his own dreams. He has seen visions, and now this chapter this chapter is a direct oracle from God. This is God speaking through this angel. So this chapter is different from the dream, from the vision, from the interpretation. So we've got multiple ways that God communicates through the prophets right here in Daniel. So we're talking about a direct oracle from God now, brought by this messenger angel. Um, we talked last week about the the goings on in heaven. Um, Paul told us that we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and forces. Um, and we get a good view of that in the last part of chapter 10 when the angel is telling us about the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece. So these are heavenly angels that are up there. We say angels a generic term. They're they're a heavenly being, um, and these are angels that are were put in charge of certain um, of certain nations, and they are tasked by God to watch over those nations and represent them in the heavenly in the heavenly courts that are up there with God. So and we've always got to remember that there not only things going on down here, but there are things going on in heaven, and we get a view of that in the last part of chapter 10, where we have the prince of Persia that was contending against this messenger angel that's trying to get this message to Daniel. So, in addition to things going on down here, remember there are things going on up there in God's court. So we get a view of that, and we start getting a view of it here in this oracle that we get from God in chapter 11. So I'm going to try that bit that I tried last week and see if I can uh, put this. There we go. So there we've got some pictures tonight. So I think that'll help us because we're going to be talking about some maps. So I want to make sure everybody understands where we are with those maps. So and here's the introduction. We start off in chapter 11. We start off with verse 2. Remember that first verse in chapter 11 was something that I I'm still thinking about. Oh, wait, Bonnie. Bonnie
What?
posed Bonnie Soulsby posed a question to me, and I forgot, and I wanted to go ahead and address that. She was asking me about a book that she's currently reading, and I actually pulled this book, Bonnie, but it all of a sudden left my library. So I'm going to go with what you sent here. And you were talking about this book is by oh, what's his name, Bonnie?
Herbert Armstrong.
Herbert Armstrong, right? Herbert Armstrong. He wrote a book called He Was, or this is a book about him that he was right. And she was asking a question about a passage that she was reading. and I'm gonna guess that it's the underlined part, Bonnie. Uh, he is saying that there's a reason Mr. Armstrong correctly forecast after World War II that America would lose the will to use its power and never again win a war. He knew that when God threatened in Leviticus 26:19 to break the pride of your power, he was referring primarily to Britain and the United States in this modern age. The irony is that the same God who promised to break our pride is the one who gave us this tremendous power in the first place. God blessed America with unprecedented wealth because he promised it unconditionally to Abraham. He did so because of Abraham's obedience to God's law. That is why, up until World War II, our peoples were richly blessed. Now, you said that you didn't quite understand that.
No, because I always thought that uh, God gave Abraham not the United States, but other land.
Yeah, and I know a little bit about Armstrong's work. He has several commentaries out there, and they seem to be very solid commentaries. I was trying to find my marker to see what he thought about um, when Daniel was written, because remember that's one of the big red flags. If you're reading a commentary and somebody is thinking that Daniel was written around the 200, 100 and 200 BC range, somewhere in there, if you
Yeah.
see that, that is a person who really doesn't believe in the supernatural, in angels, in uh, prophecy. It's somebody who is very secular, and but I can't find where he stands on Daniel. But one of the things, but like I said, his commentary on what was it, Ezekiel, I think it was. I looked through, seemed very solid,
Yeah.
very solid. However, when I see something like that, God blessed America with unprecedented wealth because he promised it unconditionally to Abraham. When I see something like that, that's another red flag.
I know. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I think my best guess, and I think it's a pretty good guess that that Armstrong believes that God finally got fed up with Israel, and he did. He got fed up with Israel. Only just because he's fed up with them, he sent the northern tribes off and scattered them everywhere, and he sent the southern tribes, Judah, into Babylon for 7 years, 70 years. That's what we're reading about now. And then finally, and we'll get to this in Revelation, finally, he had really had enough of them when they crucified his son, that he destroyed the temple. He had Rome as his agent destroyed the temple, and since that time there has been no temple, no priesthood, no daily sacrifices. The Jews have been on their own. So that was a real divorce right there in 70 AD. And a lot of Gentiles, and this is not very old. This only starts around around the 1500s. So this is not very old, but around then, us, the Gentile Christians, started to think that we got tired of waiting for God to bring Israel back, because that's what a prophecy sort of says, is the Jews will return to the Holy Land. We kind of got impatient waiting for God to do that, which is that is a dumb thing to do. And we kind of said, well, what we think. And I grew up with this. This was in my church when I grew up, that God has sort of replaced Israel with the church, the believing Gentiles and believing Jews. God sort of replaced them. So any prophecy uh, beyond the crucifixion of Jesus, when they talk about Jerusalem, they talk about the Jews, they're really talking about the church. It's called replacement theory. God replaced the Jews with the church. Well, this has never been God's idea. Never even crossed his mind, because it, exactly like Bonnie said, God made a covenant with Abraham that Abraham's seed, his progeny, his descendants would be the the keepers of the promise, the covenant, that they would have the land that God promised them, promised Abraham, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob eventually got there and took it over and lived there. And that land, even though God got tired of them and basically divorced them for a bit, he's going to bring them back to that land. So when we look at prophecy, anytime you hear somebody talking about the United States or even Europe, even when they talk about Europe, they're probably replacement theology folks, and they are they're not, we're not talking about antichrist here. We're probably not really talking about false teachers. It's just they are deceived. They're deceived. And I think Mr. Armstrong is a replacement theology, folks. So you've got to be very careful listening to. Like I said, his commentary on the Old Testament seems real solid. He seems very knowledgeable about Hebrew and the Jewish culture, the ancient Jewish culture. He seems very knowledgeable. It's just when he gets to the crucifixion, I think he's been deceived into thinking that the church has taken the place of Israel. And I think he's going to get a surprise. No, he's not. He's not still alive. He's not still
No, he's
alive.
gone.
Yeah. So I think he got a surprise because as far as I can tell, he's probably a good Christian.
Yeah,
He probably got a surprise when he got home and
yeah.
and and found out the real thing. So that's what I'm thinking is going on there, Bonnie. Is that
Well,
he?
when I read that, my thought was, well, everybody always says the United States ain't in the Bible nowhere, and I'm like, okay, so we missed something.
Yeah, yeah. So and that's what we need to be looking for, is little things like that we learn here. We know that the United States is not going to be in the end times prophecy, except as maybe a minor player. I think Jeff. He just came on. I think Jeff mentioned a couple of times that there's some places in Ezekiel where it kind of sounds like that Ezekiel may have been talking about some of the nations in Europe and maybe us getting involved in some of the end times, the 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 second advent, getting involved with that coming up. So anytime you see somebody trying to fit the United States in, and like I said, even some of the nations in Europe, you got to be very careful and look at their overall picture, because you don't replacement theology is not, it's not good. It's not good. God did not replace the Jews with us. We we are with them. They are not with us.
Well, I figured you'd set that straight.
Yeah. So yeah, and good for you for looking and seeing that, Bonnie. That means that this class is doing something. It's doing something. So watch for those little clues. Watch for those little clues. All right, sorry, I got off hand, but I wanted to answer Bonnie, and I had that's why I had my phone sitting here for to remind me, and I was wondering why I put my phone right here, and then oh yeah, okay, so yeah, that's the cats in my brain.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, and and while we're doing this, anybody else have any questions that you might have had saved up? Okay, um, now we'll go on. We're in chapter 11 and verse 2. And now I will show you the truth. This is the angel speaking. And remember, the angel is speaking for God. So God is saying, now I, Yehovah, will show you the truth. Behold, three kings shall arise in Persia, and a fourth shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he will stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he is risen, his kingdom will be broken and divided towards the four winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, that's his children, nor according to the authority with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. Now I want to stop there for a minute. What he's talking about is over here on the picture. You see, it says, well, it reminds us that this is not a prophecy. This is an oracle. This is an oracle from God. This is God's words here. So we're now in the at the end of the Media-Persia Empire, and we're going into the Greek Empire. And these Persian kings here, there were three main Persian kings, and this fourth Persian king was very powerful, just like it says here. That Persian king, you probably heard of him, Xerxes. That was the last Persian king when Alexander came along. And remember, we're talking about the ram of the Media-Persian Empire from chapter 8, and the goat of the Greek Empire from chapter 8 also. So this is when the goat comes and just breaks the horns of the ram that is Media Persia. So this
I have a
happened.
question, if I
Yeah,
may ask. I've heard different things, but is Xerxes and Ahasuerus, are they one and the same?
yeah. The kings that we're talking about here, and I said there were three kings.
Right,
There's actually some more, but a lot of them didn't rule for very long.
right.
They were. This is a very turbulent time in world history. This
So,
this
so
time
were they
here.
one and the same, or were they different people?
My guess, and I'm guessing, I think they're one and the same,
Okay.
and I believe that Tom mentioned that somewhere in his lesson, and that's why I
Yeah,
said I
I
think
heard
they're
that
one and the
one
same.
one name was Xerxes because it was Greek, and the other one, Ahasuerus, is I think it's either Persian or Hebrew. I
Right.
can't remember.
And remember, we're talking about three languages here because we got
Yeah,
Greek, we've got Persian, and we've got the Median Empire, the Median language too. So we've got three different.
right.
And then if you throw in Aramaic,
Um, yeah.
uh, we're
Okay.
dealing with four or five languages here, and that's why. dealing with these kings uh, is very difficult because yeah, there were more than four kings during this time when Media Persia were ruling, especially the Persian Empire, but they came and went pretty quick. So the prophecy of but there were three very powerful kings, and then when Xerxes came in, he really got things going. So this powerful king, and when you read the histories, you find out that Xerxes did a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, he lost against Greece pretty much. I
Yeah,
mean, he
and
did win some territory, but not much.
yeah, and he had been messing with Greece for a while.
Right.
He had been trying to make uh, movement towards the east. And let me move us down to a map here. So he Media Persia was right around in here, and he's been trying to go this way. He's been trying to go this way, but number one, remember there's a there's a small sea in here between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. So getting across this little land bridge is not easy, or you got to go by sea. So him getting forces across here to deal with Greece was tough.
Yeah, they're
So
not. From what I read in Herodotus, they were not considered a sea people.
right,
They were good at land battles,
mm-hmm,
so that's why he lost at Salamis.
yeah,
Really bad. But
yeah,
anyway, I don't want to take too much time up on that.
yeah. Like I say, this history is very turbulent, very turbulent time in world history. Um, but now that we're talking about Greece, uh, I mentioned this last week, but I want to make sure you really get it. Is that um, in when we look at the actual Hebrew here, and this is chapter, this is Daniel 11:2 here in the Hebrew, we get in 11:2 it says. And I will show you the truth. Behold, three more kings arrive in Persia, and a fourth far greater than them. And when he has become strong enough, his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. So we got both mentioned here. And Persia, when you look at the Hebrew, it's paras. This preposition here is in. So the Hebrew just adds this letter here, which is the the lamed. So it adds that lamed in front, which means in, and then there's paras, Persia. So that name is the Hebrew name for Persia. The Persian was para something or other, but Persia, that name pretty much is a transliteration. However, when we get down here to Greece, we got something completely different. Yavon, the Hebrew word for Greece is Yavon, and you think, where did they get? How did Greece come from Yavon? And I mentioned last week that Yavon actually, and remember that Yud, uh, eventually as Greek and Latin came in, that Yud, that is Yah, became a J. Hebrew doesn't have a J sound, a voiced J. That's why Jesus' name in Hebrew is
Yahweh.
Yeshua. So when you see a J in a biblical name, it's probably a Y sound, a Y sound. So this Yavon here was a son of Japheth. And Japheth had several sons here. And when we look at the table of nations in Genesis and track down where these guys went, this is where the table of nations tells us that Yavon went. So when Hebrew at this time is talking about Greece, they say Yavon because here is modern day Greece, but actually what they're talking about is pretty much the northern border of the Mediterranean Sea. So there's a lot of people here that they are talking about Yavon being. And Yavon even goes all the way to Tarshish. So the Greek that they're talking about is not just this little nation here. It's and part of Macedonia too. So it's important to check the names that the translators use because sometimes they will use an English representative of it like Greece, and yes, that is true, but you've got to make sure that you understand that in the actual Bible that name is Yavan, and it doesn't Persia pretty much means Persia, but this country that they're talking about is actually something from way over here, and it includes a lot of different people. So, and that can lead to some confusion, and we actually will see it in later in chapter 11. So just remember this Yavon um, that the angel is talking about is the people that are from the north of the Great Sea. And we'll see that right here in the next verse. That's why we're talking about this. Here he reminds us we have a first latter days right in front of Jesus' advent, and then we have a second latter days after Jesus was crucified, dead, and buried, and rose again. That starts our second latter days where we're looking for his second coming. And then at the end of the second latter days are the end of days, the end times, the end of all time. It's the end. So just remember that we've got two latter days, one before the first advent and one before the second. And we're going to see them get tangled up in this chapter 11. So here's where we are now. This is the Greek Empire that we're looking at. So back to our reading here in verse 5. Um, we're talking about the end of the kingdom. Then the king of the south, when you see king of the south, the Greek Empire, remember from chapter 8, the Greek Empire was one great horn that was broken, and then four horns came up. Well, the four horns that they're talking about is, and remember here it says that the kingdom, his kingdom shall be broken and divided towards the four winds of heaven, but not to his his children, nor according to the authority with which he ruled. His Alexander's empire, he had no children, so his empire was divided amongst his generals basically. And these are the four major generals here that we see: Macedon, Pergamum, the Seleucid Empire here, and then Ptolemy's empire down here. These are four of the best generals that Alexander had, and they sort of divided the kingdom up amongst them. So when we get here, now we're talking about the king of the south. They're talking about one of the Ptolemies that ruled Egypt. So the king of the south, think Egypt. The king of the north, we call Syria, but look at the size of it. It includes the Persian Empire, which the Persian Empire is all down here and all up in here. So when they're talking about the king of the south shall be strong, they're talking about Egypt, the Ptolemies ruling Egypt. When the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and he shall rule, and his authority will be a great authority. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain. I'm sorry, question? Okay. She shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he in his arm shall not endure, but she shall be given up, and her attendants uh, and he who supported her in those times. And from a branch from her root shall arise in his place, and it goes on like that, talking about the talking about this, and you can find this slide, and you can find also all of the text for this history here. The 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 first half of chapter 11 is a basic repeating of the history of area this area and the battles that went on in Egypt, in the Holy Land here, and up in Syria and out into Persia. This was a hugely um, violent, disgusting, stabbed in the back, a horrid time. And Jeff can attest to it. He's read Herodotus. This was this this daughter is married off to this king, and this alliance was made, and then this king turned his back on that alliance and betrayed that guy. It is, but you know what? It's word for word what happened. When you look at the first half of chapter 11 down to verse 20, it is, you might as well be reading Herodotus, because it's exactly what happened. Here's a marriage. Antiochus the Great marries off one of his daughters to Ptolemy to to create an alliance here, and then turned around and betrayed Ptolemy. It is a mess, but it is stunning that you are reading a history book that was written centuries before it happened. And that's why the modern biblical studies people cannot they cannot accept that Daniel was written in 800 BC. That is 6 centuries, 7 centuries, eight centuries before this happened. And it's like you're reading the history of it. It's like you're reading the history of it. So up until verse 21, up until 2021, it is very clear, because we're looking back now at prophecy. We're looking back at prophecy, so it's painfully obvious to us that this is talking about the history of that era in world history, word for word, word for word. And that is part of this first latter days. It's part of the first latter days. When we get to verse 21, though, when we get to verse 21, that's when things start getting gray. Because what they are talking about now is an overlap. We know the first half of chapter 11 is talking word for word about the first latter days. When we start looking now, and you can tell when you read this, there is a change. It goes from very specific. This king's daughter married this king. This king betrays this king. When you start getting in verse 21, it starts getting a bit more, uh, a bit less specific. But when we read it, and I'm gonna let you read that part of it because we're almost out of time, and I want to get I want to get through Daniel so we can get to Revelation. So I want you to look through that and read, starting in verse 21. Read, they are without a doubt. God is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, and if you've got a Catholic Bible or an Eastern Church Bible, they have the book of Maccabees in it. That is in the Roman Bible and the Eastern Bible. If you don't, you can get you a book. You can get you a complete apocrypha. Or you can find this online. Look up the book of Maccabees. You can find it online. You don't need a book. I have to have a book. But
There's actually some colleges that'll let you read it for free.
yeah, yeah, there are several, and if I can remember, I still owe you guys some news sites. I haven't gotten forgotten. I forget for a while. Um, but there are several sites that have all of the apocrypha, all of the pseudepigrapha. They have all of the extra biblical uh, Bible sources, and Maccabees is one of them. If you read in Maccabees, the first first Maccabees, the first chapter is a description of what Antiochus Epiphanes did to the Jews. It's very graphic, and it is written as a history. So it is what happened through the eyes of the Maccabees, that group of Jews. But because it's written very gray, and we start looking at things that didn't happen during Maccabees' reign, but it says they did, and because it's written so general, we're I, I'm I'm sure that we're talking about we're talking about Antiochus Epiphanes as being a type, a shadow of the Antichrist, and that is not an odd belief. That is pretty much standard standard commentary that Antiochus Epiphanes is, and you see it says down here when Tom put it here, the Antichrist will be patterned after Antiochus Epiphanes.
Yeah, you
So
see that
he
in
is,
Matthew 24, because Jesus talks about let the reader understand when he talked about the abomination
yeah,
of desolation. So yeah, that definitely coincides.
yeah. So it is pretty much standard. Even the more liberal scholars will tell you that Antiochus Epiphanes is pretty much supposed to be a type of a picture of the Antichrist. So the things that he did to the Jews, we expect more from Antiochus Epiphanes. He's going to do worse. We expect more from the Antichrist. He will make the Antichrist look. He will make Antiochus look silly. What he's going to do. But remember, as it said, these are the things that will happen to you and your people. The angel tells Daniel, these are things that will happen to you and your people. And that's why, Bonnie, it's very dangerous for us to try and paint the United States and, like I said, even maybe Europe into some of this end times prophecy, because the angel told us in God's words very clearly, this will happen to you, Daniel, and your people. So
Well,
look,
I know some of the 12 tribes, moved out that way. Um, the where's Switzerland or somewhere, Sweden or something, out that
right.
way.
Yep.
And but I never knew that they crossed over into the U.S. And everybody says no, so that just piqued my interest.
Yeah. There, in modern times, yeah, the Jews are everywhere. The
Yeah.
Jews have migrated everywhere. In When you look at the migration of um, some of the tribes, some of the tribes ended up in very specific places. And we're almost at the end tonight, so we did look over chapter 11 for next week with the idea, and if you want to go check the, it's the first. There are actually three books of Maccabees, Maccabees 1, 2, and 3. Um, look over the first book of Maccabees, the first chapter. You will find an account of Antiochus Epiphanes, and look over this last half of chapter 11 with the idea that this is Antiochus Epiphanes, but it's also a shadow of Antichrist. And we'll pick up here next week. All right? And we'll try and finish up next week. Maybe. Maybe we will. Any
Thank you,
questions
Nora.
before we end?
Good lesson. Thank you, Norm.
Okay.
Thank you, Norm.
All
God
right.
bless everybody.
Have
Thanks
a
a
good
lot,
God
week.
bless
guys.
everybody.
Have a good week.
All
You
right, you too.
too.
Bye bye.
Stay warm.
Yeah.